talk about it through the same language that they're talking about it. And again, like if we don't have the conversation around pleasure or around, how women are feeling satisfied, or even men for that matter, like how it is that you can have a mutually thing, then you can't talk, you can't have a conversation here when you're not really discussing what people are imagining. So overall, I have felt like really great. I felt a really great response, which makes me realize also how much there's not tools for them. And
patriarchy hurts everyone.
Yeah, and also, I'm just gonna tell you, I keep my thing hella women-centered. I'm just like, y'all women, like, go fuck some shit up. Like, go put these motherfuckers in their place, kind of thing. But still, even then, like, I feel even like when like the sisters are getting empowered and they're just like, it like just feeds the community. And this is also why women are at the center of the health of their community. Because, you just feel it. You're just like, you just,
So, in connection to this latest initiative that the Obama administration has put together, this My Brother's Keeper.
Yeah.
And there's this conversation that's happening. It's like $3 billion over the course of 3 to 5 years to put an infrastructure together to save, to rescue, to heal African American men and boys of color. Actually, they don't say that, but it's actually black men and boys of color.
Yeah.
But the conversation is really being framed around black men.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that men get to have the label around race, and women, we get to have the label around gender. What I know, being an African woman who has raised 2 black boys, is that black women raise black men.
Yeah.
And so when we don't have a conversation around how to also engage in how are we cultivating healing and new paradigms for women and for women's identity, and for how to not be a teenage mom like I was, then how are we going to not continue to segregate and separate the conversation in our communities?
Yes.
Because what continues to happen is, I actually had a mother who was very good about giving me a lot of information about my body and how biology worked and all of that, but no conversation around abortion, no conversation around pleasure. That was something that I had to learn on my own, and I learned it the hard way.
Me too.
I learned it the hard way. Trial and error. But a lot of information on biology and just kind of the inner workings of sex. So let's talk a little bit about initiatives like that say the boys have this kind of energy and this information and this policy, being evolved, and we continue to have conversations that I haven't heard any conversations that are about saving black girls. Or girls of any race or color.
So first, I think that the gender binary has to go. I think that I think that we just can't raise boys and girls. Like it's just not going to hold up. And I say this because, I'm more and more because this whole concept of masculinity. Women are earning more in the workplace. Like the need to be in a traditional heterosexual domestic partnership is not what it was anymore. It's just not. And women just are more independent than before. You even see it with the baby boomers. The baby boomers are the fastest growing divorcees. And it's because even them, they're shedding the shame of getting separated. So I think that the patriarchy in a way also worked to protect an economic system, right? And that need is just not, it's just not there anymore. They want to defend that need, but it doesn't hold up anymore. So as a result, I think that I would strive to a place where young boys can learn how to be sensitive, and young boys have a space to be along the gender spectrum. I think that that's the future, and I think that when we continue to have programs that talk about serving boys, often at the cost of girls, and we're still falling into these, because first we're still falling into, even when you begin to talk about, well, what issues affect boys, and how do we interact with boys? Sometimes I think that the models they propose are actually really recycling some of the same shit we're trying to get rid of. So they say, well, let's just have them, be around strong men. And it doesn't really talk about, well, these strong men are bringing some shit with them that they're still teaching the young boys. And on the contrary, let's rethink gender here. Let's talk about folks who, let's talk about queer folks and how many young people, when they get to experiment with the spectrum, actually don't, they just are not falling into these girl-boy things. So,
Yeah, the binary is
so,
particularly in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's yeah, so I think when I saw the president do that, I was like, man. At the same time, I mean, young girls are the fastest growing, also prison population. Where women of color are the fastest growing population getting infected with HIV. We continue to be poorer, get paid less. So, and then young girls. In addition to that, I mean, young girls are growing up not just in rape culture. They're growing up in a culture that overwhelmingly teaches them to be passive. Mm-hmm. And you just have to drive down, go look at the ads. And every single ad is a woman like this or like that or like
prone.
She's just like
she's
this.
Prone.
She's just like
that's what she is.
Like she's just not doing shit. She's so inactive. She's just like and But if you look at the men in the ads, they're bold. They're moving. They're at their office. They're doing something. And I just think like these messages around us just being passive agents in life is so freaking tiring. And even like when I watch popular films, or even it continues to be there. So not only are they growing up in rape culture, but they're also growing up to always have to second guess their power. They can't just be badasses. If they're not given permission, they're not given examples to do that. So I think that when I see things like what Obama did, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like the girls. I mean, you have to serve them. I mean, you have to serve them equally, and I think that it should be done through a racial justice lens, and it should also be done, of course, through the patriarchy.
Through a gender lens. Let's go a little bit further on the lack thereof a very thick line anymore between gender. How that shows up in the Bay Area in particular.
Yeah.
Transgender or just non-gender conforming,
yeah.
like I'm a body, I'm a human body. And so when I hear language like bio boy or bio girl, like biologically a boy, biologically a girl doesn't mean necessarily that I conform to the social construct of a female gender. In your work, I notice that often I don't depict, I can't depict any kind of gender at all. It's like this is a face.
Yeah,
it's
I do that on purpose.
Okay,
I do that on purpose, and if you notice, my characters don't have genders. You can't really define what they are. And I do that on purpose because I want it to be fluid, and I also want people to see themselves whoever they are. And also, it's like I also really resist drawing women with like long hair and like, you know what I mean? Like I can either draw a woman with certain features and long hair, or I can draw men and women equally, and you figure it out. And I like that better because then I don't fall into this pattern where I'm using coded signs to define gender. And and also because although I'm female identified, I definitely have a lot of what is called masculine energy. It shouldn't be called masculine energy because it's equally feminine energy, but I have a lot of that, so it definitely comes out in my characters.
Once you take off all of the other trappings of what a gender identified body looks like for it to be a girl, to be a woman, to be a femme woman, to be a maybe not a femme woman, then I get called sir at least once a week. This doesn't matter because we're looking at this. And we're looking at this. And so doesn't matter how much jewelry I have on, it doesn't matter if you can see my breast, it doesn't matter about any of those things. So in terms of how that shows up in your artwork and how your usefulness of it in terms of gender politics or gender lens, I'm looking at the butterfly in particular, and that there are faces there, but that the symbol of the butterfly, in addition to it being beautiful, in addition to it being about transformation and movement, of bodies, of humans, of animals, of flying things and winged things and four-legged things, that there is also this sense of equality in it. Not necessarily the symmetry, but just the equality that all things move about. Let's. I want to talk about what it sounds like in your generation to be a feminist, and your work gets defined, of course, a lot as feminist work. You're asked to speak in Women's History Month events, like such as this one, for instance, such as this one, and that there's a different conversation, I think, with young folks who are listening to, who are part of rape culture without us necessarily knowing that we're perpetuating it, and engaging in music and dance and movement or whatever it is with pop cultural icons. So earlier I brought up this idea of Beyonce, who, had her last tour based on, her...
I totally don't follow pop culture. So I don't know.
Okay, so
all that.
I wouldn't say I follow it a whole lot, but if you have a tour, named, called, what's her husband's name? Jay-Z, what's his name? Carter, Mrs. Carter Tour, I think that's what the name of the tour was.
What?
Yeah, so she is seen as powerful,
Wow.
she's seen as beautiful, she's seen as powerful, she's seen as an artist who has broken through the box,
Yeah.
and all of her pieces around, that she has claimed the flag of feminism.
Yeah.
And and whether or not she is that, I actually, there are things about Beyonce that I like, but I think it's because she's hella sexy. You know what I mean? I mean, she just is to me. But I don't actually follow her politics. However, what I did find interesting in terms of media was watching all this conversation, particularly on the Real Colored Girls blog,
Yeah,
and my girl
yeah.
Christabel just broke it down
Yeah.
in terms of, you don't get to hold up that flag because this
Right.
flag belongs to only a few. Again, here's this box of feminism, this box of womanism, and only a few get to hold it up. How do we continue to use art as a vehicle for really dispelling those ideas, dispelling those myths, and really creating a new paradigm?
Yeah, I think the main thing about art is that it's not linear. It's constantly moving and changing and shifting, and that's the beauty of art, is that it's hard to define it or to grasp it. So I don't know. I think I would say that people can define their feminism, but at the same time, I did read some of the articles where they were calling her out, because I think they should call her. I mean, she's a corporate symbol. She's a symbol of so many things.
And a capitalist.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
no, you can't say that. So while I critique that, I also think that there's a space for people to self-define.
And we would say that is feminist.
Yeah,
Your self-definition
Yeah.
itself.
yeah. There's a lot of queer folks and trans folks that identify as feminists.
I would identify as feminist.
Yeah.
And womanist. Yeah,
Me
I would
too.
definitely identify that way. Let's go back to the pleasure principle. For instance, yeah. So the conversation that you were having around these pieces, their creation being inspired by your orgasms, the conversation around pleasure in the society, again, it continues to be underground. Like, we don't have the opportunity as women to talk about this feels good.
Yeah.
And so I'm not someone who would consider myself part of the poly community because I haven't been in any of those spaces. I am, however, someone who does not identify as a person who needs monogamy, to be in a fulfilling relationship with someone. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about, and even circle back to some of the conversations we had a few weeks ago around what does it mean to out yourself as someone who has multiple partners.
Yeah.
And has the capacity to love more than one person, maybe deeply or maybe just on the surface, but that we live in a society that really doesn't allow for that kind of identity.
Yeah.
At least not being out about it.
Yeah, and actually, well, the only reason I came out was because I saw other people coming out about it, and I think that this is like the piece on abortion. I actually think you have to come out and share your story in order to shed the stigma. And I would also love to hear from other people who identify as poly, if you are comfortable sharing, why it is important to come out. I think it's important to come out because we also have to shift the conversation. We have to let people know that, hey, I'm your neighbor, I'm your daughter, and I believe in these kinds of things, or you're my brother, or you're my, you're my best friend or my business partner, and this is how identify, and let me introduce you to my values. Because actually, I think when you talk about it from a values perspective, it's actually a very positive conversation. You're talking about honesty, consent, awareness, that everyone involved has to be aware, transparency. What else? Directness, the ability to ask for what you want. Because in a poly relation or in a poly community, precisely because you're letting go of all these expectations around, whether or not you're gonna, just letting go of all the
shame.
Fear, guilt, shame. You gotta show up. You gotta be able to say, okay, this is what I would like. It's really hard to ask for what you want sexually sometimes. It took me a while. And then I got some good training, and now I can do it. So yeah, and it's also, my mom would slut shame me a lot. I think she would notice how many people would come into we had a duplex that we would share. She doesn't live there anymore, but, and she would see, and then she would just shame me. And finally I had to confront her and tell her that, I'm just not gonna be her. I'm not trying to live her values, and that if she really cares about me, that she has to support me because she's breaking me down. That shit hurts. When she would do that, it really would fuck with my head for months. So finally she stopped, and then shortly afterwards she said that she was going to be separating from my dad because she wanted to be her own woman. And that she was inspired. She said, I got inspired by, you're always talking about women and freedom and doing what you want, and now I'm going to do what I want. And it broke my heart, to be honest. I was really, really sad. And I still am a little sad, but that's what happens. It's like when you show up with your family and you're honest, then you never know. It's going to trickle,
Yeah, I know. There's been a lot of conversation that's happened, even inside the Impact Hub community, different folks, working different projects, different genres of social capitalism, for all intents and purposes, who have come up to me and had conversations about the idea of dating people in space. People who they're like, asking, is this person connected? Are they monogamous? Do they like girls or boys? Do they care? That conversation. So all of that is starting to bubble up a little. It's really interesting. Some of those people were at our first talk, and one of the things that came out of that talk was the possibility of creating people of color space for a party.
Oh, cool.
Yes. You're the one who brought it up. Cool.
I just got an email about that, actually.
Did you? Well, I'm just saying that the conversation is still bubbling here inside this space as well. So I guess I want to put that back on the table, not that we have to discuss it now.
Yeah.
But I also I want to talk a little bit about the conversation on how we raise children. My sons, are, they were raised by feminists. They will tell you they were raised by a feminist. Their grandmother is a feminist. And yet and still, we still have to deal with heteronormative ideas around relationships. We have to deal with issues of slut-shaming girls, particularly my younger son, who he doesn't seem to have any issues around how many women he sleeps with. He has issues around the women who he sleeps with, how many people they sleep with, and how we talk about that and what that means in society. Have you had any interactions or conversations with young folks, not college folks?
All the time.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I encourage them to consider about what they want, what their desires are. Like, what are you feeling? Where is your boundary? Like, where do you say no? And just encourage them to explore. You know what I mean? I just said, like, it's okay to, like different people and like different, if you like young girls or if you like young men, like, that's cool. And if you need advice, if you need, me to talk to your dad or your mom, I will. And just try to be, like, supportive to them in a way, like, it's a very delicate thing because at the same time, sometimes the parents get mad at me. But I try to.
Where do you even get to have these kinds of conversations? Like, where are these?
Because I hang out with a lot of young people. Also, like, because I do a lot of stuff in high schools, and these kids are like way advanced.
Yeah.
Half the time they're like, and then it's funny because they fall follow me on Instagram sometimes, and so they actually can see some of the stuff I post.
Got it.
They know who I am sometimes already before I get there because they Google me and they Facebook me. So, I do a lot of stuff in high schools, and my number one goal is to make sure that all the young girls in there, like, leave the workshop feeling like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm a badass. And then to just, encourage them to ask questions, to not just accept everything they learn, and to challenge adults, because adults lie. And adults lie to them.
Well, they lie and they withhold information.
Yeah, and so, I don't know, I think like high school kids love me. They're just, I think, they're just like, oh, like keep it so real. Yeah, well, we should open it up to questions.
Yeah.
I prefer to date people of color, and God, it's just a hard conversation to have sometimes because I think, it's just, there's like a lot of shit that our communities are still dealing with. And I can understand that when like you've been stripped of your human rights, that sometimes the way that you show power is in love. And so to unlearn that can be a challenge. But the way that I approach it is I approach it through a loving way, and I try to say, well, and I'm honest, and I say, look, I respect you and I really am enjoying hanging out with you, and so I want to just tell you about who I am and how I, operate in the world, and tell me a little bit about, what you're up to. And usually they may say, often I get to the point where there's somebody else involved, right? And then I can say, okay, well, cool. Like, from my point of view, I think that's totally okay. And that I want to encourage you to really like explore, like do what you want to do, and I'm here to kind of support that because I think it'll bring a lot of benefits back to the connection that we're having. To be honest, like I don't think you can avoid sounding kind of dorky. I can't never get around that. I always end up sounding kind of like dorky because I have to say I'm serious. I can't get all. It's like hard to get all sexy when you're talking about like I can't avoid feeling.
You in the corner.
No, or it's hard to because you have to have a very honest conversation, and you have to just say, well, this is how these are the things that I value. I would like transparency from you, and I would like to get a sense of if there's any other folks that you're involved with, because I want to approach it from a positive space. I want to encourage you to do that, but I also want them to be aware that I'm here because I feel like that's something that would be respectful towards me. Or conversations when I have to talk about, well, what does it mean to be poly? I have to say, well, what it means is that I value honesty, and I want directness, and you should ask me for what you want. Like, what are you feeling? What do you want? And you can't have that conversation when you're like already getting naked. You kind of have to have it. Seriously, I've done it before. So it's just, that's what I mean. It's kind of dorky because you have to be like, hey, so, yeah, and honestly, it's hard because I realize how many people are still stuck in this like really weird thing where they're like, no, this like way of interacting in relationships it's really messed up. It's really based on misleading. It's based on withholding information. It's based on this power dynamic of I'll only tell you what I want to tell you. So when you create a space where you're saying, I don't do that, it's hard to find, frankly, it's hard to find people who will be like, okay, I can get with you on that. It requires a lot of communication, and that's why it is, I'm not going to say it's like super easy for me to date, it's not. But at this point, I can't go back. I'm not going to go back to fuck like janky ass cheating thing. I'm serious. I'm just like, that is so Or when I start sensing that, like the other day, I was with one of my partners, and then I ended up going to a jazz show, and then I ended up hooking up with a musician, and so I had to go. But I had already had a conversation with my partner that I was gonna. Well, they're not my primary partner. There was someone I was seeing, but I had told them already that hey, I would like the space to also engage with other people because, you know, I want to see other people. It doesn't affect how I feel about you. And we were still exploring. And then when I came back and I say, well, hey, you know, I want to tell you that yesterday I hooked up with my friend, and this is who my friend is, and da da da. And then he just looked at me, and then I was like, so how do you feel? He's like, whatever. And I was like, see, I'm not going to play that shit. Come on, man. Like, I clearly can see, like, clearly there was some flinching in your face. Your eyes, like, kind of drooped. I was like, see. And I was like, you know, I said, like, your body is not saying that things are okay, and it's a safe, I want you to know that you can talk to me about anything, and we can process what you're feeling, and let's talk about it, because otherwise, then I have no way of connecting with you, and I want to help navigate through what you're feeling. So at that point, I was like, okay, I can't invest in this relationship anymore because I'm not finding, there's not a giving thing, and I'm just not going to go back to that whole thing. Well, can I read your mind? Can I like figure out what's wrong with you, and like you not communicate, and you not act like a baby with me, or you don't talk to me for 3 days? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm past that, and it's so in a way it's good because you basically set your standards. Right, but it's just
going back. What I have found is that I am no longer willing to be with a lover who has all these taboos. And all these, you can't touch that, you can't do this, you can't flip me over, you can't be on top, you can't be...
Yeah.
I'm not willing to go back to that, even if I love that person.
Yeah, no, I know.
Even if I love them deeply, I can't go back to it. It's like,
and
no,
also,
now we're here. So new line. It's like, now there's this.
And it's also really amazing because that's self-love.
It is.
That's self-love.
This is
when
what
you learn that even though someone is super hot and maybe you have a really great chemistry, that you can walk away because your values are the most important, are the things that you will hold up. I think it's like, it's really cool because I didn't used to be like that. I felt like I dealt with a lot of shit. I dealt with a lot of abusive, manipulative relationships, and I'm so happy to be at a point where I'm like, okay, now I can walk away because the self-love and self-respect is there.
Yeah. Healing.